thank you, and welcome everyone to the sprint demo for sprint 2020-39. So as usual, let's start with a brief summary of what we did in this sprint, and then let's have some demos, maybe discussions. So in this sprint, we have continued to work on making our generated code and target RTist C++11 compliant or up to date. So in this sprint, we have introduced the override keyword and the null pointer constant in many places, both in generated code and in the target RTist. And we have this preference to decide if the C++11 standard should be used, and we use that preference to control this also. Also, when removing these zeros that previously represented nulls and using null pointer, we also got rid of lots of C-style casts that could cause warnings when using some static analysis tools. Then we have a new feature called type alias. So type alias is a C++11 concept that is similar to type def, but has some benefits. For example, it can have template parameters. So we support this now both in the user interface and in the model compiler. We also added properties so that you now can mark functions as deleted, and for destructors you can mark them as defaulted and deleted. We added the dependencies property page on interfaces and enumerations to make it easier in case you need to have dependencies from these kinds of elements, but that can sometimes be needed. We also worked on improving the usability of the properties view. So we have fixed some more cases where properties that are not applicable in some scenarios now are grayed out to make it easier for users to know which properties they can or cannot set. Also related to the properties view is something called property set default values. So I don't know if you've used that feature, but already before it was possible to modify the default values of many of the properties by setting a so-called default model. And previously, this was only possible to do by modifying models, which was tedious in case you needed to do this on lots of models. So now we've introduced a global workspace preference that you can set only once in case you want a certain preference default to be used globally. So a typical example is if you want to have your own custom scheme for naming the generated getter setter functions that the model compiler can generate. And speaking about getters and setters, we have now also a new command that makes it possible to get such operations in the model. Not only getter setters, but also constructors and destructors can be created that way by means of a new commands that we have added in a special operations menu. And this can be an alternative to using, for example, existing properties for generating such functions in case you want these operations to be present in the model. We also made some usability improvements in the TC editor code tab. Now you can use incremental find, like you can do in other Eclipse text editors, so Ctrl-J. And last but not least, we have improved the way we handle dependencies in our generated makefiles. So it helps a lot if you have models with dependencies to external code and you want to have proper incremental compilation when you modify such included header files, for example. This worked in the past in the classic builder, but now also works with the model compiler for the GNU compiler and with recursive make. So we don't have any incremental features in this sprint, and I also have a slide here about our next major release called RSARTE 11.1, and we started to work on this, at least from an analysis point of view, in this sprint. And there has been a discussion around which Eclipse version it should be based on. And the two candidates are 2020-06 that came in June and 2020-09 that I think came last week, or at least very recently. And the benefit or reason we considered 2020-09 was that it includes a new version of CD10, but we also found out that it requires a Java 11 JVM to run. And this means that this would mean extra work to do that compared to previous upgrades, and it also means work for all customers that have their own plugins because they need to rebuild them with Java 11. So we therefore decided that 11.1 will be based on Eclipse 2020-06. So we will follow our previous scheme with adopting the June release of Eclipse. And you should note that this will be their last RSARTE release that can be run with Java 8. So it can be good to do some investigations when you have time to see if your own plugins work with Java 11, because eventually we will need to go take that step to Java 11. The sprint deliveries will be a new version of RSARTE 11 2020-39, and you should install it on 2019-06 version of Eclipse. And we didn't do any changes in older versions in this sprint. There is also another delivery, which is a command line model fix-up script, which fixes the C data conversion that we talked about in the last sprint demo. So now you can run this from the command line in case you need to update multiple models more easily than running the model fix-up. So I think that's it.